Welcome to this edition of Access Together. These shows are made possible through the combined efforts of Shelby County Schools and GHS-TV. The shows are hosted by the members of the community and utilize the staff and facilities of Germantown High School. If you would like to watch our live stream or get more information about these shows, log on to our website, ghstv.org. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the following presentation.
Welcome to Let's Talk Money. My name is Harvey Cook and this is my co-host Kelly Bolton. We thank you for tuning in as we have the distinct pleasure of hosting our community's foremost business and community leaders. Memphis has an unparalleled music history and heritage, and today we are honored to have two of our city's leading pioneers in the industry as our guests. Please join me while we welcome David Less, managing partners of More or Less Publishing, and Barbara Newman, CEO of the Blues Foundation. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
David,
coming.
tell us a little bit about your background.
God. Well, I started out in journalism, writing in college and graduate school for different magazines, Rolling Stone, Downbeat, and Memphis Magazine. And really, I've done a little bit of everything. I've worked in music television. I was involved in the very early years of video music on television for a company out of Indianapolis, and worked in Atlanta and Austin, Texas there. Produced festivals, and most recently I've had a record company and a music publishing company for the last 15 years. We just sold it 2 years ago. So I've been involved in a lot of different aspects. I even had her job at one time.
We're going to get there. Tell us about International Records.
Well, Memphis International Records was a label that I started with a partner. We had an office in LA and in Memphis, and it came about kind of funny. It was right after 2000, and the stock market was terrible, and I called this friend of mine who had been with Warner Brothers Records forever and had just been retired as a result of the AOL buyout. And I said, "Did you lose money in the stock market last year?" Knowing he did. He said, "Of course." And I said, "Me too." And I said, "Did you have any fun doing it?" He said, "No, I did not." And I said, "Well, I know how we can lose money and have fun. Let's start a record company." So he got along with it. He said, "Sure." And we started the label. We produced over 30-something titles. We were distributed internationally. Sony distributed us, and we started the publishing company 2 years later. And I guess the rest, we've had 2 Grammy nominations, and I guess the rest is history.
That's fabulous. Well, what about you, Barbara? What is your background, and how did you end up with the Blues Foundation?
It's sort of a circuitous route. I started off in money and banking. I worked for a large New York bank and managed a middle market lending portfolio of about $40 million. Learned a lot about finance, corporate finance, money and banking, and then pivoted into not-for-profit management. Got involved in both as in not-for-profits on the staff side as well as on the leadership side. And when my predecessor, Jay Seeleman, was retiring from the Blues Foundation after having been there for about 12 years, and they put out a national search, it felt like the right fit. I'd also been involved in music with my husband, who is an entertainment attorney, and we'd produced a number of music events for not-for-profits. So I had some understanding of the music industry as well. So the fit worked, and here I am 2 years later.
That's interesting. I can't imagine myself ended up in the music industry. I have no musical talent at all, so don't worry, you will not be producing anything that I've sung.
I join you. I have no musical talent
Okay, well,
whatsoever,
good.
but I enjoy it, and I respect the people who produce it.
I love music. I have a lot more respect for it, probably because I have zero talent in it.
David, before I ask you this next question, I need to tell you the ground rules. You cannot talk about losing money in the stock market on this show.
Oh, well, that was a long time ago.
Tell us about the Memphis Music Hall of Fame and what it is and what your involvement is with that.
Well, I had worked on the Smithsonian. They were a client of mine when we started the Memphis Rock and Soul Museum. And that was opened and launched in 2001, I think. And about 4 years ago, the executive director, a guy named John Doyle, had a great idea, which is, startlingly, there was no Memphis Music Hall of Fame. And there aren't a lot of cities that could have a Hall of Fame
Right.
and really be effective, in music. But Memphis is certainly one of them. And so he had the idea, and he got a group of us together. He got it approved through his board, of course, and got some funding for it, and got us together about 4 or 5 years, whenever the first class was, and told us about it. And it was a bunch of people that had expertise in the history, music history. Peter Goralnik, the writer Peter Goralnik, Robert Gordon was there, Pete Daniel, who I'd worked with at the Smithsonian, and a fair group of people. My business partner Bob Merlis. So we got together and we created the first class. And originally it was supposed to be sort of a website with the hope of eventually becoming an actual museum. But that sort of fast-tracked, and it opened up as a physical structure. And so the first class was 25 people, just so we'd have a base of people. And now it goes to, I think we have 6, 7 a year typically. And my involvement is as a volunteer, support the cause and serve on that committee to help select the people who get in, which is a difficult task.
I bet. Barbara, what about the Blues Foundation? What is its mission? What does it do for the community?
It's actually an international organization, but it's based in Memphis, which is the home of the blues. And the mission is really to preserve blues heritage, to celebrate blues recording and performance, to expand worldwide awareness of the blues, and to ensure the future of the art form. It is a not-for-profit organization, and so we have tentacles, so to speak, around the world because the blues is such a revered music form, it's everywhere. We have 7 key programs that we run: the Blues Music Awards, the International Blues Challenge, the Heart Fund, which supports musicians with healthcare needs, Generation Blues scholarships for young children, Blues in the Schools, and the Blues Hall of Fame. And we have a physical museum now as of 2 years ago. So we're doing all of that work, plus networking the industry and the musicians and making sure people are aware of the music so it can continue to grow and thrive.
Oh, how many people are part of the organization then?
The physical organization itself, we have 5 full-time staff members and 4 staff members part-time who help us at the Hall of Fame Museum. And then we have our 23-person board and thousands of members.
Very interesting.
And Barbara, how do you fund all that?
That's always the challenging part in a not-for-profit.
Right.
We have a number of methods of funding revenue streams. We have membership, so we have membership dues at different values and levels. I encourage anyone who loves the music to become a member of blues.org, put in a self-promotion there. And we also have sponsors of events. We have private family foundations. We have grants. We receive a nice grant from the Tennessee Arts Commission and from Arts Memphis. So a number of different places where the revenues come.
Well, let me ask you, David, we were talking before the show and there was a student that we asked, are any of the ones that are filming this, are they involved in music? And if a student wanted to start their own, kind of record label, what advice would you give them?
Probably don't.
Don't. Let's be truthful, right?
Be truthful. The record business has changed a lot, and I'm really quite a dinosaur in that respect. Record labels had a different function. They originally were to identify talent, nurture talent, make the physical product, and distribute it. And that's really not the case any longer with digital now and with access to YouTube and different distribution outlets. You don't need the things that we used to do. So in terms of a record label, I would suggest that they really create their own label as being themselves and not sign other acts. But if they want to...
Excuse me, Sam, I'm going to cut you off just for a minute because it looks like we'll have to take a short break. So don't go away as we continue our discussion about Memphis's musical heritage as well as our bright future.
Listen, I realize that I'm not perfect, but it all really started to change because you judge me for having a problem. No one is going to know that I need help. I need help. I know that no one is going to judge me for having a problem. I realize that I'm not perfect, but it all really started to change because you listen.
Why is my son having trouble in school?
Finding lowest airfare to Istanbul.
No, I'm tired of fighting with my son over his homework.
Home, walk, restaurant. Need a review?
No. He's smart, but his mind wanders.
7 wonders of the world.
Why don't you understand me?
I do. I was trying to show how Connor feels every day. Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
You're watching the award-winning GHS-TV, a nationally recognized student television station.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Money. If you're just tuning in, I'm Harvey Cook, and this is my co-host Kelly Bolton. And today we've been talking with David Less, Managing Partner of Merless Publishing, and Barbara Newman, CEO of the Blues Foundation. Today we've been discussing how music journeys from an idea to the consumer's ear. So thank you for joining us.
David, sorry we had to cut you off, but we were just laughing because I said if a student wanted to start a record label, or anyone for that matter, you had just answered it very bluntly, just don't do it. But then you went on to explain, and we had to cut you off, that really things have changed. And you were saying, I think that right before we cut you off, that just don't do a label, just go under their own name.
Well, I think that's the thing, that, you know, the record companies even later evolved into just marketing. You know, they would market, but now it's just not that necessary to do that. So if you're an artist, you know, there are 2 record worlds. There's the major label that Taylor Swift and Timberlake and those people belong to, and they have record companies. And the rest is independent. And it's a large segment too. It's not to say it's a lesser segment, but it's a different music and different parameters. And so if assuming that you are not Justin Timberlake, and you want to make music and have artistic freedom and have a way to get it out and distribute it, you can do all of that. You don't really need to aspire to a record company. So, you know, you have to do the business side, you know, bookkeeping and stuff like that, but basically there's no reason for you to start signing artists and be a record company.
Barbara, what are the civic and economic benefits of having the Blues Foundation and the Blues Hall of Fame in Memphis?
They're actually growing, and they are significant because our 2 biggest programs are the International Blues Challenge and the Blues Music Awards. The IBC is in January every year, and we will see about 800 or 900 musicians from around the world descending upon Beale Street for a 5-day competition. Fans and industry and other musicians coming to watch and see who the up-and-comers are around the world. So we know from that event, combined with the Blues Music Awards, which are in May, which are basically the Grammys of the blues. It's when we give out the biggest awards for the past year of performance and recordings, that those 2 together bring in over $7 million in tourism dollars to Memphis. So they're pretty significant. When you add in the museum, with the daily people coming in to visit the museum, people traveling through Memphis because it's a music destination, so they're here to see all the other music museums and information around about music here, it grows and grows from there. And we also know that our events also create about 60 or 70 new jobs every year.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Right.
Plus the Blues Foundation, from a marketing standpoint for the city, is I mean, it's an international organization. You travel overseas and they know about the Blues Foundation. And the value of that, I mean, if you ask Kevin Kane, the value of that is sky high. So they do great work.
Incidentally, I'll put in a plug for the museum.
Yeah, Harvey
Barbara
was
gave
there.
me a great tour yesterday, and it is fabulous. I mean, if you love music and don't even know anything about blues, it's worth
Right.
going. It is fabulous.
It celebrates our Hall of Famers. There are about 120 or 130 individuals who've been inducted since 1980, but we also have in the Hall of Fame individuals from industry. David mentioned Peter Goralnik, he's in the Hall of Fame. Dick Waterman, Bruce Iglauer, who started and runs Alligator Records, as well as songs and albums and pieces of literature. This past year, W.C. Handy's book, Father of the Blues, was inducted. So you can really get a very good understanding of the trail of history of the blues just by studying and reading and listening to the music of the great blues artists.
Let me ask you, and I don't know, David, maybe this is more of a question for you, but with things like Spotify, iTunes, how has that changed the dynamics of the music industry and how these artists can actually make a living?
They can't. Spotify, you know, for us dinosaurs, Spotify was the nail in the coffin. I mean, it basically, because you can't sell what you give away.
And why, can you explain to me in layman's terms, why is it being given away? How are the artists making money? Because how's this happening?
Well, the artists who make money on Spotify are, again, the ones who will stream 50 million hits, you know, and even those
And they're
people,
paid by the number of hits they get?
yes,
Or-
they're paid by
okay.
the plays, the number of streams.
Okay, so
So if you're,
there's-
if this cameraman, you know, gets on Spotify, in a year he might make $1.30, maybe. But you know, and even the integrity artist Adele and Taylor Swift recognized the problems with it, and for a long time they withheld their music from Spotify, and but it was just ubiquitous.
There's a lot of advocacy work going on right now for what they call fair play, fair pay for fair play. And I know that just in the past day or two, Recording Academy representatives across the country were meeting with legislators trying to figure out how we can enact some laws to protect the musicians, because they're very dependent, and we see this with our blues musicians that are involved in the Blues Foundation. They're very dependent on touring in order to feed themselves. And I mean that in a very specific way, that in order for them to make enough money to live and eat, they have to tour, which puts them on the road a lot more years, a lot more days than they used to be, and it does impact their health. So we want to make sure that they get fair pay for the recordings that they're putting out there as well.
Yeah, it does seem very unfair, and I didn't realize they were getting paid by the hit, so I can see that is a big issue.
Well, I really wasn't. I was serious when I was recommending don't start a record
Yeah,
label.
don't start.
I mean, if you're an artist, you got to do it.
Right.
But if you're thinking this is where I'm going to, you know, live in a swank place in L.A., it's probably not going to happen.
Right.
The odds are very heavily stacked against you.
Barbara, let's talk a little music.
Okay.
Tell us who your favorite couple of blues artists are and why.
Oh, you're going to get me in trouble, Harvey. I'm not supposed to say that. I have.
Maybe I'll retract
Well, we'll
it.
look at our Hall of Famers. Okay, so I can tell you that if you look at our Hall of Famers, I'm a really big fan of Sister Rosetta Tharpe. I just love her music. I find the way that she presents herself in performance. I encourage people watching this to go Google her and watch some videos of her as well. But we've got amazing Hall of Famers that have just been inducted in the past couple of years. Everybody from Mavis Staples and Jimmy Johnson and Eddie Clearwater to Elvin Bishop. So there's a large range of blues, and it falls into a number of different sort of silos or categories that would appeal to anybody. It doesn't all sound the same. A lot of people think the blues is all the same sound, but you can find anything from what was Southern soul music, which is part of the blues, to the traditional sounds of a Robert Johnson, even a Muddy Waters, to a more contemporary sound, to a rock sound. Eric Clapton picked up from all the blues artists. The Rolling Stones did as well. So there's a wide variety that people can find to enjoy.
Yeah, I wish we could play some music on the show. It's time to take our next break. When we return, we'll finish our great conversation with music industry legends David Less, Managing Partner at Merless Publishing, and Barbara Newman, CEO of the Blues Foundation.
When they test you, stand firm and move only when you hear the seatbelt click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
Open road, here comes the Heffley family.
Whether it's a short trip or a long haul,
estimated time 47 hours.
they will beg.
You're hungry? I'm happy to provide.
They will plead.
Deep fried butter on a stick.
But whatever you do, don't wimp out.
Now you're talking.
Make them buckle up.
He can't hurt.
Remember, safety first. Cheese curls second.
Are you orange?
You're watching the award-winning GHS-TV, a nationally recognized student television station.
Thank you for joining us on Let's Talk Money. Today we are honored to have David Less, Managing Partner of Merless Publishing, and Barbara Newman, the CEO of the Blues Foundation. And with just a little time left, we want to jump back in and finish our exciting conversation. So, David, tell us a couple of artists who are not in the Hall of Fame that you think should be?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, we try to balance when we do our selection so that it's not all the obvious people, because there are a lot of people who have had major impact on the history of Memphis music that would all but disappear if we didn't say. I mean, Professor McDaniel was in the first class. W.T. McDaniel was the band director at at Manassas and Booker T. Washington. You know, people who are really deep into the history understand who he is, but now he's in the Hall of Fame. Dub Jenkins is the guy who I think would be in the Hall of Fame. Fred Ford, Thomas Pinkston, you know, these are all lesser known people. The obvious people are the obvious people. Certainly Don Nix ought to be in the Hall of Fame. You know, we try to balance that. So like this year we have Cowboy Jack Clement, who's a very well-known producer, and Roy Orbison, who of course is one of the top artists, with Frank Stokes, who you know is a blues artist from Memphis. So we try to really look at the class and determine. We've said to people who said, well, why isn't that person in? And the answer is the last person in is no less important than the first person in. Right. It's not a question of importance, it's a question of balancing out the class.
Well, Barbara, let's talk about women in the blues industry. What do you see as the current role of women in blues? And kind of looking forward 10, 15, 20 years, where do you think that's going to go?
I think that the women are equally as important as the men are in the blues, and there's some fabulous blues performers, female performers coming out of the blues scene right now, and there will be for a long time to come. At our last Blues Music Awards last May, we actually opened the entire event with an all-women set with everybody on the stage. It was all women, all the instrumentalists, all the singers, and the audience loved it. They thought it was great. And we're seeing a lot of young women, teenage girls that are going to the blues camps that we're supporting them with Generation Blues scholarships, pursuing the music and just as avidly involved in it. And we're seeing more women involved on the industry side as well. Publicists, managers, label owners and executives, attorneys, etc. So I think that the door's wide open, and it's just a matter of if you like the music and it's the music that you really gravitate towards, that you want to create or help create or make sure that other people have the opportunity to hear, I think the opportunities are there.
That's great.
David, you said earlier about recommending that somebody wants to start a record label, don't do it. So how about, and there's got to be students at this school who are interested in music, either as artists or the business of music, that are dreaming of moving to LA and being involved in music, or to New York. In fact, I've met some of them. What would you tell those people, and what advice would you have for them?
Well, I mean, it's not don't start a label. It's don't start a label in the traditional sense of I'm going to sign artists and I'm going to be a label chief and we're going to do your marketing and we're going to do your distribution and the traditional label things that don't exist anymore, really, outside of the major labels. You are a label if you make music. You know, if you're an artist, you're going to make music. You know, I mean, you should. The music today is as vibrant and exciting and great players as it ever has been. It's not a question of music dying. It's a question of the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. The distribution of music,
yeah.
the
all of that's
marketing
changed.
of music, everything's changed.
Right.
Yeah, well, we see it in our industry as well. I mean, with the technology changes in the world, everything is changing. So it's kind of like you have to adapt.
But here's something that's very interesting that we've noticed is a lot of musicians, because it's so easy to get the products to self-record, to set up your own little home studio.
Yes, I've heard people do.
What a lot of musicians, I think, don't always recognize is having a producer outside of the process to help guide them is a valuable thing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, fully self-produced and self-recorded doesn't necessarily get you the best product. Having those extra sets of ears to listen and help guide the process can really elevate what is being produced.
And
well, and now what people do is, the technology is so easy and so affordable, they'll say, I'm going to play all the instruments. Well, that's the dumbest idea ever.
Thank you,
Never
David.
do that.
Thank you, David.
Never do that. Music is an interaction. Music is interaction between people. It's a language. And if you're just sitting there talking to yourself, you're just talking to yourself. You need the interaction with other musicians to really.
I'm sure it creates a mood and a feeling, and like you said, interaction. But so if somebody wanted to record a song, they've created a song, they've written it, they want to record it, where would they go? How would they do that?
Well, if it were me, you would go to a professional studio and hire a professional musician and have a professional music,
and a good producer, and make sure that the sound that you want is the kind of sound that comes out of that studio. Every studio has its own kind of sound, so know where you're going.
You have to save up a little money. Otherwise, you can make one in your bedroom.
Right.
I mean, you can download the stuff and like I say, play all the instruments and make one in your bedroom. But it's going to be less satisfying, I think, and less artistic than if you really do it correctly. Like Barbara said, you need other ears, and you need other musicians to really create a work of art. And let's face it, it's all art.
Right. Sure.
I mean,
sure. Barbara, it's not easy. It's not easy financially being a musician, an artist. Do y'all have any programs that help artists?
We do. We have one in particular that we're actually quite proud of, and it's getting more and more recognition. It's called the Heart Fund. It was started maybe 10 years ago or so, and the purpose and the mission of that fund is specifically to assist blues musicians who otherwise wouldn't have the resources for medical care. So if a blues musician needed to be hospitalized for some reason, or needed even dental care, needed a root canal, and didn't have the funds to take care of it, they could apply for Heart Fund support, and we would have resources available to help them. We also use funds from that fund to make sure that blues musicians can have respectful funerals if they can't afford otherwise to have a funeral and a headstone and be buried properly. And one of the things that we've started in the past number of years is also providing health screenings. So at each of our events, we have health screenings for all the musicians who come through, free of charge, full lab work. We have a doctor on call. We have registered nurses there to look out for them. And we also took our health screenings to the Americana Music Association's conference in Nashville this past September to provide the same services. Of course, our take on this is if we can keep them healthy on the front end, then it saves resources on the rear end from more intense medical needs. And usually when artists come through these health screenings, it's not uncommon that we'll find somebody with full-blown diabetes or high blood pressure who don't even know it. And they're out on the road and they're not necessarily taking the best care of themselves, so we're able to help get them tracked and follow up with them to make sure they stay healthy.
I wish we had a lot more time. we got a lot more questions. Once again, we want to thank our guests David Less and Barbara Newman for being with us today. For more information on our show, please check us out on the web at GHS-TV.org, where we are streaming live 24 hours a day. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter. We hope you will join us again next month on Let's Talk Money.